Hey, what's going on, guys? I just wanted to do a quick review of my initial impressions of the all-new Canon 7D Mark II. This thing just came out a couple of days ago. I've had my copy for a few days now, and this camera has lived up to the hype. A lot of times when something's as hyped as much as this thing is, it tends to be a letdown, but Canon didn't let us down with this one. There's a lot of features about this camera that have been discussed, some more than others. One of the big discussions about this camera is how well it performs at high ISOs, and it does an outstanding job. I've seen a lot of reviews posted online from people, and unfortunately I don't really like some of the reviews, even though there's some very good photographers who went out and tested this. Unfortunately, this camera is marketed towards the consumer, serious amateur photographers, people who want to go out, get pictures of their kids at high school football games, things like that. And I've seen a lot of reviews where people are out with 400mm, 500mm telephoto lenses on African safaris or at NFL games, and that's not a real test of what this camera can do, because the reality is most of us aren't going to use those kinds of lenses. The question about this camera is how well it performs in low light. Just about any camera on the market is going to take great images when you've got tons of daylight out. So I wanted to really test this thing out and push its boundaries. So I took it out to a high school volleyball game night before last. The gym where the game was played was old when I went to school there in the 90s, so it's really old now. There's a lot of different lighting issues in there. There's hot spots, there's dark spots on the court, so a player can move 3 feet and go from being overexposed to underexposed in a hurry. The lights put off different color casts as they replace the aging lights or the lights that burn out. They put in a new kind of bulb that puts out a different color cast, so you've got orangish colored lights and bluish colored lights. So it's a nightmare to shoot at, and overall the gym is just dark. Usually when I shoot there, I'm shooting at 6400 ISO with a 400 shutter speed, wide open at f2.8, and my pictures are just a little bit underexposed. I don't like dropping my shutter speed below 400 when I shoot sports because the motion blur is just too much in the image. Even at 400 it's too low, but sometimes you have no choice. So what I did, I took this out. I've got the Sigma 70-200 on here, which is pretty common lens. You've also got the Canon, which is 70-200, which is very common. And I think for most consumer photographers, that's pretty much going to be the extent of lenses that they're going to have. If not, you're going to have something like this kit lens, which is going to perform even worse in low light. So given the situation, the bad lighting, I thought it was a great test for this camera, and it performed. I ran it through all the different ISO settings, all the way up to 16,000, and the images weren't bad. Yes, they were noisy. And when a lot of people talk about noise, they think just about the grain issue. This camera does a really good job of controlling the grain, even at 16,000. What you see more of, in my opinion, as you get up to the higher ISOs, is you see a loss of detail in the images. So they won't look as sharp, you'll lose some of that fine detail, but even at 16,000 the images honestly weren't that bad. Obviously the lower you can keep that ISO down, the better your images will be. Another thing that's been talked a lot about is the frame rate on this camera. It is incredibly fast. At 10 frames per second, it's easy to shoot a lot of shots. I usually shoot about 200 shots when I shoot a volleyball game. I came home with over 500 shots from the game. So it took a lot of time to go through and edit them and pick the best ones. It's great to help you get that peak moment of action. One of the things that hasn't really been talked a lot about is the buffer size on this camera. The buffer will shoot 33 RAW files without even worrying about how fast it's writing to your memory card to clear that buffer, and 1,000 JPEGs. So, you know, for me with the old 7D, I would shoot about 10 shots, and then I would start getting and it would start clicking. With this thing, you can just hold the shutter down, and it'll just keep going forever, especially if you're in JPEG. So there's really no reason to miss that peak moment of action. One of the other great things that I really don't think has been talked enough about this camera is the focusing system on this. It is greatly improved. You got 65 autofocus points now instead of the 19, and they work better, they're more accurate, it focuses faster, and when you're in servo mode, which is what you should be using when you're in sports, it does a phenomenal job of locking in on your subject and tracking them as they move across the frame. Volleyball for me is a very difficult sport to shoot. The ball moves very fast and erratically, so you're constantly trying to reacquire your focus on different people. It can be frustrating. Then you throw the net into the situation and you've got another problem because sometimes your autofocus wants to lock in on the net instead of the player. With this camera body, I was able to just lock in on a player and it kept focus on them as they went up for their spike without switching to the net. And I got some pretty good images. Yes, I wish that there was more light and I could have used a lower ISO for sharpness issues, but I was very pleased with this camera body. It's just been phenomenal. All of the images that you see are unedited, straight out of the camera, JPEGs. The Adobe has not released the RAW file update, so you can't convert these into Lightroom, the RAW files. So I shot in JPEG, and what you're seeing as I talk are unedited. And like I said, all the way through the ISO range, especially when you get down to like 6400, very, very nice looking images. As you get up to the 10, 12,000, they're still usable, but you're going to lose some detail. I even put this thing on the H1 mode, which is the expanded ISO range, which is 25,600, I think it is, and the images weren't that bad. I mean, I wouldn't recommend shooting there if at all possible, but it's nice to know that you have it. One of the, to me, a true test of how much noise is in an image is when you print it and looking at the print. So I took this image here. This was at 12,800 ISO, so it was very high. This is a 13 by 19 print, and you really can't see any grain hardly in the image. I mean, it is amazing. Yeah, the image isn't as sharp. There's not a lot of fine detail, but it's plenty good enough to even print this half poster size print, and it's a phenomenal camera. For anybody who wants the best that there is, yes, go with the 1DX. It's going to give you better high ISO performance. But outside of that, this camera rivals it in every way. You've got the ability to shoot to a compact flash and SD card now. You've got backwards compatible batteries and chargers with this thing. So if you've got the old 7D, you can use all of your old equipment. It's just a really good camera, and it's at a really great price. I think Canon has really delivered. The other great thing about this for the consumer level shooter, because it is a crop sensor, you can use like the 70-200 lens, and it's effectively a 320 millimeter lens. Instead of, if you did buy a 1DX or a 5D Mark III, you're going to lose that extra reach because you're going to have the full frame body. So for a lot less money, you can get pretty close to the performance of the full frame. Not quite, but for anybody who's just going to post pictures on Instagram or Facebook, it is more than enough to get great images. You will be very happy with this camera. I'm going to take it out here the next couple of days. I'm going to shoot some high school football with it. It's rivalry week. It's the end of the football season. So I'm going to also be at a couple of high school rallies, which are going to be really low lit situations. And I'm going to really put this camera through some pretty challenging shooting situations to see how it performs. And I'll post those videos here in the next couple of days. But here's the sample images. I hope you guys like this video. I never know what to say to end a video, so I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Thanks.